All right, everybody. Welcome to our next professional guest. This is Margaret Bailey. How are you, Margaret?
Good morning. I'm fine, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your class.
Um, so, just so everybody else know, where are you coming from? Where are you visiting us from?
My home base is typically Massachusetts, just north of Massachusetts, but we were just recently doing some work for a public municipality in Southern California. So I'm currently sitting in Southern California, a couple time zones beyond behind you.
Oh yeah,
So I've had my 2 cups of coffee already.
yeah. Well, I'm a cup and a half in myself. Um, well, so is the weather beautiful there? Of course.
It is definitely nice. It's warmer than it is where I normally live. Yes, I would
Yeah.
say that.
We just had a cold snap and it got down to like I want to say 32 or 33 the other night, and I'm not a fan of that in April. You know, it put a damper on my fishing for one morning, and I wasn't too happy. But well, I guess to start us off with, could you tell us a little bit about where you're from, like as far as growing up and where you went to school and all that?
Sure. I grew up in Southern California, in the LA area, and I went to school. And the reason I asked about the program is my degree is actually in hotel and restaurant management. Um, and so I went to Cal Poly Pomona, which is actually one of the two polytechnic universities in the state of California. So there's Cal State Polytechnic University Pomona. And I graduated with a bachelor's in hotel restaurant management. And I chose that program because I was very interested in the hospitality, the customer service, the visitor service industry. And so my degree is pretty much a third business, a third liberal arts, and a third hospitality. And I have found that that mix has served me well in my career progression. And I've also found, which I think speaks to the students in the program they've chosen as a university, that the tech focus positioned me very well, because it really focused on a lot of hands-on learning and experiential learning, and that has been very valuable throughout my career.
And that's one thing with the last like year and a half we've kind of struggled with the COVID situation and making sure that they get some of that in unique ways, or trying to emulate that in some way. Well, what kind of things, as far as like you talked about hands-on learning, what kind of stuff did you do while you were in classes, or what were you involved in as a student?
The program degree required 1,000 hours of work experience in the industry. So I would say that because it was a hotel degree and restaurant degree, that's a relatively, the service industry is available. So I did everything. I happened to have nearby my home a hotel, and I kind of explained in my first job to the management team that I was interviewing with that I was a student in this program. I have to get my hours. Over the next couple of years, could I rotate through your property? Could I, spend one summer doing, housekeeping, another summer doing sales, another summer doing something else? And that is potentially a strategy, as you think about your career, to identify, I would say, a friendly company that is close to home, and
Yeah.
and just be frank with the owners about, look, this is the type of student I am, this is the sort of exposure I'm interested in getting. Can we kind of informally have you help me and me help you learn
Yeah.
about the different facets of the business? And so I basically worked primarily in the hospitality industry through all my summers, and I really purposely wanted to get into different parts of the hospitality industry so I could figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to avoid. So I think that's another piece of advice: is sometimes a summer spent doing something that you didn't enjoy, even though it could be as valuable as something that you did, because you will have had it underneath your belt, so you understand it from an operational perspective, but more importantly, you can begin to steer yourself to another area.
And that's, I think that's great advice, and I think that so many times some of the students, they kind of want to get the same experience over and over again through different work experience credits and whatnot. And that's something I try to put emphasis on too. Is like go learn. You never know what you might fall in love with as well, but just go get a diversity of experiences.
Yeah, I would say to that, Mike, I think that there may even be a hybrid between both of our approaches in the sense that, if you discover that you do like something, then trying to figure out how to go to the next level and show
Yeah.
competency is a really good idea. But that if you aren't sure, don't stay there. Try something else.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good way to look at it. So after you got done with your degree, what was your next step?
Well, when I was graduating, I pretty much knew that I didn't want to go in our industry. And based upon the program I came out of, there was kind of at that point 3 paths. It was, well, maybe 4 paths. There was, go into the country club business, go into the restaurant business, go into the hotel business, or go into consulting. And I didn't have any consulting experience. So I went I went into the hospitality operations business and went into a management training program, which was traditional back then. And
Mm-hmm.
so I came out and so I knew there one opportunity wasn't open. I knew I didn't like these other things. So I chose a management training program with Hyatt Hotels. But what I
Okay.
would say that I knew about myself then is I had an opportunity to work with different hotel chains. And I asked myself some questions of what type of people would I like to be serving? Did I want to serve the business traveler, the leisure traveler, the high-end leisure traveler? And I actually made the decision to choose the Hyatt Corporation because I knew who I wanted to help serve. So I
Okay.
think, as students think about those companies that they want to work with, they need to, coming out of school, they not only need to be thinking about their work environment, but who they'd be working with outside of their environment. If they're
Right.
if they're in the Forest Service or the state park or whatever, do you want local residents to be your clients? Do you want tourists to be your clients? Do you
Sure.
want, so do you want a mission of an agency that is preservation versus interpretation? So listening to what you get excited about is pretty important.
Yeah. So Hyatt had what was their target clientele? Which one did you end up picking?
It was basically a business client,
Okay.
and that was opposed to, like, I had an opportunity to go work for the Ritz-Carlton, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to be serving someone who desires this, super high level of service. It's kind of like overkill. I want to be with someone who wants a clean, safe, happy place to be, and is a professional, and that turned out to serve me well. And they had
Yeah.
a good training program.
And pretty straightforward too, is usually with the business clients. This is what I want. And there's, as long as you deliver, you're in good shape.
Exactly.
So, so what kind of stuff did you do with them? I mean, and how long were you there?
Yeah, so Hyatt training program is a year, and typically what they do is they move you through every department of the hotel, and then you end up being a manager or assistant manager in a division. So I was with Hyatt at a property in the DC area for 2 years. I worked in the banquet department. I was assistant banquet manager, and then I got a promotion to be in charge of convention services, which is all the conference stuff. So you can laugh at that, Mike, because you know what I did 4 years ago. We helped
Yeah.
put on the conference. So some of those skills came back to me, I'm laughing here with Mike because I helped co-host the 2018 National Outdoor Recreation Conference, and every meeting planning skill that I had to deliver on the ground when I was 23 years old came back and helped me at 53. So life is cyclical that way. So I basically worked with Hyatt for a total of 3 years and was working god awful hours. And my roommate said to me, Margaret, have you ever actually figured out what your average hourly rate is? And I said, no, I'd be really sad if I started trying to think about that. And so I basically, back then, there was this thing called the want ads in the paper.
Yeah.
And I looked for, I found this ad for a consulting company who did hospitality and recreation consulting. I applied and I went in for the interview, and I laugh at it this day because the principal had never heard of my university, which I thought was like, I was like, where'd you go to school? And I was like, I went to Cal Poly Pomona, and it's the largest hospitality school on the West Coast, and the
Yeah.
program's great. And I didn't even think that he didn't even know about my program, which is, and I basically probably had so much, I don't know, I guess confidence at 23 that I could do the job, that I got it. And so that really began my kind of pivot from operations to consulting. But there was one other point that I think told me I could be interested in this, because I had one class in college called hotel development, and we did market, financial, and operational feasibility work in that class. And I said, I kind of really like this class.
Yeah.
And then when I was with Hyatt, whenever we went into our staff meetings, the general managers used to review the profit and loss statement, and I was very curious about it. So I guess I'm saying both these things to you and your students, because it's important to listen to that inner voice in your head about the things that you find enjoyable and you're curious about, because that usually is a clue as to something that's going to make you happy when you spend your time doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. They had I don't know how many of these students were in there. We have an online finance class, and we just, wrapped up. But anyway, we talked about profit loss statements and, some other, ratios used in the hospitality hotel industry. What is that the consultant firm you're still with?
Well, it's no, but it
Okay.
definitely was the reason that I ended up on the path that I did, because
Okay.
the interesting thing was the firm was called PKF, and the principal of the firm, in a prior life, used to be a concessioner in a national park.
Okay.
So his client base happened to include the Secretary, Maryland Department of Natural Resources.
Hmm.
And so very early on, I was doing market and financial feasibility work for roadside hotels, as well as market and financial feasibility work for golf courses and cabins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of like this stuff better than
Sure.
this stuff. And so and again, it happened by default, not by design. But because that principal happened to have public sector relationships, a portion of our consulting work was in the public sector. And I began to identify that's what I liked, because it was mission driven versus profit driven.
Sure.
And the people and the problems were more suited to my personal disposition.
Yeah. And how long were you with that company?
So that I was with that company for 83. I think I was at that company for 6 years, and as again by the default, not by design, my next job opportunity came from a client referral. Basically, a client said, my next company asked the client, who are you working with that you would hire if you could? And
Yeah.
they gave them my name. And so that company recruited me to go work with them. So basically, my career path has been hotel school, operations experience, 6 years of small scale consulting. That sent me to another small scale consulting firm, which was called Landauer. That group became stepped up to a PricewaterhouseCoopers public sector consulting practice. And then we left PricewaterhouseCoopers to go with another small company. And then we are now that small company. But I would say I've been literally one of the principals that I met at the 10-year point in my career, I am still working with now, but in a different company. So I've basically been through Hyatt, PKF, Landauer, PwC, CHM. So I've been with 5 companies, and I'm basically 30 years into my career.
Yeah. Well, and that's it's kind of interesting because I know, when I was younger, the thing is you'll find a company and you'll work for them the rest of your life. And then as I got a little older, people were like, well, you may have 2 to 3 different companies, and then a little bit older, you may have 2 to 3 careers, with 5 to 6 companies. And now it's, when I think about what some of my students that I had early on in my career is, they may have switched career paths several times, and maybe, 6 to 10 different companies at this point, and nobody blinks an eye. And, it's just
Right.
it's an interesting world. So,
Well,
go
just
ahead.
let me just on that note, because if you, particularly if you have your students here interested in the public sector, I mean, if you think of, I don't know if you remember Mike Adam Milner, who's a great public steward. He basically started with the BLM, and then he went over to the Park Service, and then he spent some time and then he went back to BLM, and then he went over to the Forest Service. And so even within your career classification in public agencies, there's the opportunity to move. I've got a very dear client who spent the preponderance of his career in the state park organization and then recently retired and is over in a metro park
Yeah.
situation. So it's not just in the private sector that
Right.
this kind of dance of stuff is there.
Yeah, and even further, like even within like we had a guest that was in the Forest Service and worked for the Army Corps, and kind of went back and forth a few times in his career for different things. And um, yeah, it's just, so it's interesting how the culture of work has changed with a lot of that. So you're with CHM now, um, and you know that's how you ended up in the Northeast from the Southern California, which is, I think, is a big move. Um, what are some things so before we get into like what you do at CHM, what are some of the things you like about the general area being the Northeast?
Um, we ended up, so I grew up in California, graduated, and my first job with Hyatt was in Maryland. So I
Okay.
moved to the East Coast at that first job. And then because of my relationship, we then moved up to my husband, we moved up to Massachusetts. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, uh, the weather, the culture, and I would say that as I'm getting to be an older person now, that I'm not as enjoying of the colder weather. So I'll be an old fogey and say that. Um, in the recreation world, as you know, people say there's no cold weather, there's just bad clothes. Well, I'm beyond the bad clothes now. I just want to, like, I bought the good clothes and I still want to come home. So, no, it's a great place to be. I love the seasons. And, obviously I have three now young adults who, one's still in college and the other ones are out. And it was a great place to grow up. And so, and really in the consulting business, which may be a little different than obviously if you're a public steward, where you kind of, are locationally based. You can be anywhere as a consultant and go around, the
Yeah.
U.S. So where I am isn't contingent to what I do. And right now, as everybody knows, you can almost be anywhere
Right.
as you try to do your work. But so yeah, that's how I'd characterize my area.
Well, it's me growing up in Texas, Oklahoma area, and when people talked about the Northeast, it's almost like you picture it as a cold wasteland. Not really, but you think of it much differently. And then it wasn't until I visited Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, all that I'm like, this is beautiful up here. I can absolutely see why people want to live here. I'm not a big fan of the cold weather either, but it demystified it, like a little bit that, this is a cool spot. I remember being in Massachusetts and just falling in love with it. I mean, it's gorgeous.
Well, and
Um,
it does, I would say that one thing it does have, which I appreciated from California. I mean, I grew up near the ocean in California. So you have the oceans and the mountains in Massachusetts. And depending on where you live, you can be close to both. And if you need both of those environments, and then you can have solitude out in Western Mass, you can have a cosmopolitan city in downtown Boston, and you can be on Cape Cod or the North Shore and have a great water experience. So so I will say that's an underlying factor is the availability of different outdoor spaces and lack of density in the suburbs. I can get on my bike and go for an hour ride and not see a lot of cars or, so those sort of things are nice.
sure. And I also remember like it seems like everything was so close. Like, growing up in Oklahoma, it was like a 12-hour drive to anywhere. And you get up in the Northeast, it's just a couple hours to your next thing. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with CHM now, what kind of projects are you involved with, and what kind of things do you do within those projects?
Okay, so CHM Government Services is a really small firm. There's 6 of us, and we've been a firm for about 10 years. We have really, our client base is pretty much 98% public sector. We have chosen to focus on public sector clients who have hospitality and recreation assets. And basically what occurs in the public sector, so those clients include the Department of Defense, believe it or not, because every military base has golf courses, hotels, and clubs and food service. So we have the Department of Defense as a client. And then we have federal agencies, Park Service, Forest Service, BLM, state park agencies, and then county and municipal park agency clients. And we do some work for nonprofits. So it's really mission-driven public agencies or nonprofits who have those assets. So I would say the skills that we deploy are market analysis, not marketing, but market analysis, supply and demand analysis, financial analysis, and then investment analysis. All of those are part of deal structuring. So the way I explain this is we're the people who say, if you build it, will they come? Mm-hmm. If they will come, how much money can you make? And is that money enough to pay for the development of what you're going to do?
Right.
So that's kind of the skill set. And so I would say about 60% of our work is actually structuring contracts between the public and the private sector. So if you go to Hot Springs National Historic Site Park and you see those bathhouses there, that's a contract between the public and the private sector for the operation of those.
Correct.
If you go to Big Bend National Park, there's a lodge and there's a restaurant and a retail store. That's a public-private partnership concession contract. Our firm does all the due diligence and analysis to structure that deal. And so we do that. That's about 60% of our work. And we do that same work at the state, from the federal all the way down to counties. Okay. Most of and then the other probably 40% of our work is, I would call business analysis, operational analysis. We're currently finishing a very large project for the National Park Service. The Park Service is wanting to modernize its campgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so we have spent a year and a half undertaking market research to help the agency understand what is going on in the campground industry and how that's changed as a result of COVID. We undertook 6 pilots at parks to identify campgrounds that may need to be improved. And we developed a campground guide and a campground kind of development tool for the agency staff to use. So that would be, that's a project I'm working on right now. I'm also working on a market research recreation planning engagement for a county. And then the project I was just on last week is there's a city that has a marina that has been around for 30 years and they want to figure out how to make it last another 15. So we're working with an engineering firm who's doing all the facility assessment, and we're doing all the market and financial analysis to help budget the project going forward. So it's basically the business side of recreation is really the easiest way to explain it.
And so I guess, and that was a lot, right? A lot of cool stuff. What have been some of your favorite projects? Is kind of what I think would be cool to talk about.
Well, I think this NPS campground modernization project is pretty cool because it's basically helping the agency bring best private sector practices to itself. And so that's been pretty cool. I would say I'm just trying to think of stuff that's in the geographic area well, I guess there's for 2 states, so no, actually 3, no, 2 states we've done concession strategy where we've looked at both for Oregon and also for Wyoming. They engaged us to look holistically at all their state parks and evaluate where the opportunities are for entering into public-private partnerships. The other part, one of the parts of that concession strategy that actually I find I enjoy is looking at the legal and the regulatory authorities because usually, obviously, in order to have those relationships, you have to have the authorities to do so. So I've found that through my career, we've helped write regulations for state park agencies relating to concessions. So that's actually been kind of fun because, in essence, that's the sort of work where you do it and it's going to have a long-term impact.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that we did a very large engagement for the state of Tennessee, helping them figure out what to do with their lodges. And that was intriguing because we did all the work that we did led to the governor making a decision to invest $100 million in renovating building new and renovating 2 of its lodges, which in my mind said we made the case to make the investment. So it's really it's those situations where we can make a difference on the ground for the customers, both now and to the future, that have been probably some of my most rewarding projects. And I would say clients who, and this is something I would like to impart to your colleagues, which is my greatest success has been with clients in the public sector who were willing to take a risk on a new idea.
Yeah.
And that is, or a new process or a new way of thinking of something. And if I could impart one piece of wisdom, is as your students are entering into their public sector career, to watch people who are and are not willing to make risks in their career. And for those who are, and you see that they are making risky decisions, quote unquote risky decisions, or non-standard, spend some time talking to them, because it's easy to not take a risk, but it could be transformational if you do. And even failure in a risk is not a bad thing.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's like you said, understanding their process with that too is, so I only got a couple more questions. That one of them is, if you weren't in your current position and you could go out and money wasn't an object, or obligations, and you could have a dream job, or you could attain your dream job, what would that dream job be, and kind of why?
Well, that's a really good question, Mike. I actually am kind of sort of at that point in my career where I'm evaluating the next thing I need to do. And my current joke is that, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I've been spending most of my career in the leisure kind of like, self-actualization thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's world, there's a lot of people who are dealing down here with food and homes and just basic security things. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of asking myself if I need to move down the self-actualization from, self-actualization, to use those skill sets to improve the condition of folks who don't have enough money to do leisure.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of messing around with that. My parents were both educators. So I'm trying to figure out how do I don't think I want to teach, because I'm not sure I'd be good at it, but I'm thinking about how to help people prepare for and get an education, so that, education is as a portal to success. So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now, but I got to kind of think a little bit more about it.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I'm starting to get to that point in my career. I mean, ultimately, I think I've realized that if I reflect on my career, and this is really a great opportunity to do it with you in front of your colleagues, it has been service to others, that whether it was in the hotel business or in the consulting business, that service to others and mission driven, that makes me happiest.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to figure out what that looks like in the next phase of my career is really what I gotta do.
Yeah. Well, I want to say, I think you'd make a terrific teacher.
Oh.
Having known you for a little bit now, and so whether that's in your future or not, that but I will 100% do not doubt that you'd be awesome. So before we wrap up, as we wrap up, do you have any? Or so I forgot about this. I know you're involved with some professional organizations.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Could you chat a little bit about what your philosophy is with your involvement, and how you utilize that personally, professionally, and how you serve the organizations as well?
Right. So I want to do that. And then I have the one piece of advice for you as we wrap up. So yes, I would say that if your university has student chapters of associations, you need to be involved in them. You need to be, as a freshman, go to the meetings, as a sophomore, be on an adjunct committee, and as a junior and senior, figure out if you can be on one of the student boards of the associations. It's not as much for the resume building, though that helps. It's about learning, about figuring out how to manage and take responsibility and own something that you'll learn something from. Mike, we had these frequent discussions on the Society of Outdoor Recreation Board about how to get first, second, and third year professionals in their career involved in an association. Typically those costs are anywhere from, 20, 30 up to $100 to be a member of an association. Sometimes paying off student loans, paying rent may say, how can I afford this? And all I would say is ask for it for Christmas, ask for it for your birthday, make the investment, because the network and the base knowledge will continue to accumulate. And it can be as simple as just a student membership or a first year membership. You might not be able to go to the conferences, but try to avail yourself early on in your career. And then, what we saw on the SORP board, Mike, is we saw folks who were, 5 years into their first career, 10 years into their career, me who was like 30 years, it's okay to step up in different ways. And sometimes it is kind of similar to the college stuff, where once you get out and work, the idea of, okay, I'm just going to be a member and I'm going to go to the meetings. And then if you like the association, okay, can I be on the, special event committee?
Sure.
And then, and so those are all good things to do. And I just think that I get a sense in the research we did, Mike, is the companies aren't investing in their people to become members of associations, which is a problem.
Yeah.
But you need to invest in yourself. And if you can't do it, figure out someone who believes in you, who will do it, and seek out the scholarships for conferences and stuff like that. Always do that. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of them have ways that offset cost if you look into it. So I guess before we wrap up, any tidbits or pieces of wisdom for young professional students going into the field?
Yeah, I've told this to a lot of 20 to 25-year-olds. Basically, when you're in college, you have permission to ask any professional in any industry any question.
Yeah.
So your opportunity for networking is never better than when you're in college. So any professional, typically over the age of 30, if you sent them a professional email through a referral of somebody else, or even a curiosity, and said, you're a student at Arkansas Tech, you're working on this stuff, could I get 20 minutes of your time? I would say 70% of the time they will answer you and give you the time.
Yeah.
So, and with LinkedIn today, when we had an intern in our company, I said, go through my LinkedIn list and tell me who you want an introduction to.
Yeah.
And I will make an introduction. So I think students believe that they're annoying people when they ask them that question, but what they don't understand, and is evidenced by these conversations, hopefully, that your students will see, people love to talk about themselves, and more often than not, they want to help you. And if helping you is giving you their story where you can learn something, or, oh, you should talk to this person, you're missing a significant opportunity if you're not even doing it. And so I would challenge each of you to ask Mike about one person in their network that he would introduce you to that relates to your passion, and experiment, and make that your assignment from Margaret out of this call, because all this stuff you got to practice, but I can tell you something will happen and you will have more information. And that's really part of what you're supposed to be doing at this point in your career, and continue doing that throughout your career.
Sure. And I think you're right. I think that I would guess the number would be higher, but people in our profession are passionate about helping, and that includes the students and future professionals. So And just like you, any of the folks that want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or be introduced, I'm happy to do it, because kind of like you, I kind of have the same philosophy as these are the future folks that in the profession. Margaret, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I sincerely appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to chat. I wish each of your young professionals success. I am open to chatting with all of them, so that you can send them all to me if they have curiosity,
Sure.
so they can practice on me. But I'm a pretty kind practicee or practicer, or whatever the right word is. And thank you for making a commitment as students to this industry. We need passionate people who care about the land and the people who need the land more than ever now. And this is a good choice. And thank you for choosing it.
Well, I will let you go I know you're working, but enjoy the Southern California weather and all that.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks, folks. Thanks for listening to me for a half hour.
Have a good one, Margaret. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.